I raised him with everything I had, and now he calls me a burden. The words didn't just sting. They cracked something deep inside me, something I'd spent decades burying under packed lunches, doctor's appointments, and sleepless nights filled with worry. It started on a Sunday. That's when he always visits. Or used to. He didn't come for me, not really. He came to feel like a good son. Sit on my couch for 15 minutes, ask if I'd taken my meds, then scroll his phone until he had a reason to leave. But that day was different. I'd been feeling dizzy all morning. My joints ached, a deep gnawing pain that no Tylenol could touch. So when he walked in and saw the sink full of unwashed dishes and the oven cold, he raised an eyebrow. "You didn't cook?" I tried to smile. "I haven't been feeling well, Danny. I think I need to go back to the doctor." He cut me off, loud and sharp. "Jesus, Mom. You're always sick. You're not dying. You're just lazy. Maybe if you got up and moved around more, you wouldn't feel so damn miserable." I blinked. Words vanished from my throat. He'd never said it like that before. Never that coldly. My son, the baby I once held through the night as he wailed with colic. The boy I worked double shifts for so he could join the damn soccer team. He leaned on the counter, shaking his head. "All you do is sit here and moan. You want sympathy? Try cooking dinner. You're not 80, Mom." I wasn't 80. I was 71, but I felt 100 in that moment. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table with a pad of paper and a ballpoint pen and began writing. Not a letter, not a complaint. A bill. Itemized. Diapers. 14,600 changes, $3,212. Meals cooked from ages 1 to 18, $38,000. Laundry, ironing, folding, $7,450. Midnight fevers soothed, $6,200. Hours spent at parent-teacher conferences, $1,800. Gas for rides to school, practice, parties, $5,920. Christmases made magical, $11,000. Total, $73,582. Conservative estimate. Underneath, I wrote in block letters. Payment due upon receipt. No refunds. No apologies. Just respect. I left it on the kitchen table, next to a cold plate of roast chicken I managed to warm in the microwave. When Danny came by the next day late again, of course, spotted the envelope with his name on it. He opened it. Silence. "Are you serious?" he asked, looking up at me like I'd sprouted horns. "What the hell is this?" "A bill," I said softly. "For what?" "Being my mom." "No," I replied. "For being a servant you never thanked. For being a nurse, a cook, a chauffeur, a therapist. For being invisible. For being told I'm faking pain when I ask for help. For everything you think I owe you when in truth, you owe me." He scoffed, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe. Embarrassment. Or maybe just the first crack in his wall of entitlement. "You're insane," he muttered. I said nothing. I didn't need to. I just stood, slowly, and walked to my room, locking the door behind me. For 2 days, silence. No texts. No calls. No guilt-tripping messages about hurting his feelings. And then, on the third morning, a knock. I didn't answer. The knock came again, louder. "Mom, please open up." When I opened the door, he was standing there sweating, breathless, holding a grocery bag. "I didn't realize," he said. "I've been thinking. About everything." I crossed my arms. "You were always there for me," he said, voice cracking. "I took that for granted. I treated you like a maid, not a mother. I'm sorry." My arms stayed crossed. My heart softened, but I didn't let it show. "I don't want your apology, Danny. I want your respect. Your care. I want you to see me as a person, not a role." He nodded, slowly. "Then let me earn that back." He made me tea that morning, did the dishes, sat and listened, really listened as I told him how scared I was when the dizziness started, how hard it was to get out of bed some days, how lonely I felt, even in the house I'd made a home for him. He didn't interrupt. Not once. It's a long road, this kind of healing. Not linear. Not clean. But it started that day with a bill, a roast chicken, and a woman finally tired of being quiet. And maybe, just maybe, with a son beginning to remember what love really looks like. Danny started coming over more regularly after that day, but this time, he brought something with him I hadn't seen in years: humility. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring expensive gifts. What he brought was far rarer: his time, his ears, and his 2 hands. On a Thursday afternoon, He showed up with a mop in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. I Googled anti-inflammatory recipes, he said, almost sheepish. Thought we could try one together. Might help with your arthritis. I blinked. There was no sarcasm in his voice. No edge. He set the bag down, pulled out ingredients: ginger, turmeric, salmon, kale, sweet potatoes, and looked at me like he was waiting for permission. Not from a mother, but from a woman he was finally trying to understand. We stood side by side in that kitchen for the first time since he was in high school, when he'd held a spoon half-heartedly while I made spaghetti. This time, he chopped while I stirred. And when I sat down because my knees were flaring, he didn't roll his eyes. He just quietly brought me a chair and said, "I've got it." That was new. At dinner, we ate in silence for a while. Then he said, "Did you ever want to leave? Like leave us? Me and Dad?" I nearly dropped my fork. "No," I said. "Not once. But I wanted to scream sometimes. I wanted Simeone Anianito to see that I was more than a grocery list and a laundry basket." He nodded slowly, his shoulders tightening. Was I a bad son? I looked at him, not as my child, but as a man who'd grown up in a world that taught him mothers are tireless, endless, and disposable. "You were a good boy," I said. "But a boy isn't supposed to understand everything. A man, though a man should try." The next day, he cleaned my gutters, without being asked. And on Sunday, he didn't just sit on the couch scrolling his phone. He asked me if I wanted to go outside. "It's nice out," he said. "You've been cooped up too long." He brought me my walking shoes and helped me down the steps like I was something fragile but valued. We walked to the park where I used to push him on the swings. Now he slowed his pace to match mine, holding my arm with a care that made me feel safe instead of weak. I hadn't realized how good that could feel. That night, after he left, I went into the garage for the first time in months. My old photo boxes were stacked high in the corner. I pulled one down, opened it, and found the picture of Danny on his first day of kindergarten. He was wearing his Buzz Lightyear backpack, the one he insisted on sleeping with the night before. I could still hear his tiny voice yelling, "To infinity and beyond," as he ran ahead of me through the school gates, unaware that I cried the whole drive home. I stared at that photo for a long time. I think I needed to remember, too. Because healing doesn't just mean making him see what he forgot, it also means allowing myself to remember what was real and what still mattered. The next week, Danny showed up with a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. "You're not the only one who can write a bill." I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Debt payment, installment 1. Listening without judgment. Cooking dinner 3 times a week. Driving to doctor's appointments. Asking what you need instead of guessing. Paid in full, with love." I didn't cry then, but when I read it again that night, I did. I folded it neatly and tucked it beside the original bill I'd written him. Not to shame him, not to hold it over him, but to remember how far we'd come and how far we still had to go. Because the truth is, love can rot quietly in expectation. It can erode under the weight of assumed roles and unspoken pain. But if we're brave enough to look each other in the eye and say, "I forgot how to love you well," something incredible happens. We start again. It wasn't perfect after that. One Sunday, 3 weeks in, he forgot to come. No call, no message. I waited by the window like I always did when he was a teenager and missed curfew. When he finally showed up Monday afternoon, I was cold, distant. "Work ran late," he mumbled. "I just forgot to text." I nodded, slow and quiet. "You used to forget to call me on my birthday, too." I told myself it was fine. I told myself you were busy. But that ache? It doesn't care about logic. He sank into the armchair and buried his face in his hands. "I'm trying, Mom. I swear I'm trying." "I know you are," I said, my voice softer now. "But trying isn't the same as showing up. Showing up means you think of someone even when they're not in front of you, even when they're quiet." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I don't want to be the son that breaks your heart twice." I sat down across from him. "Then don't be." It was the most important thing I'd said to him since he was a boy. That night, he stayed. He made soup. We watched reruns of Jeopardy, and I beat him, as usual. And when he left, he kissed my forehead like he used to as a child, only this time. It was with the reverence of someone who finally saw the depth of the well he'd drawn from all these years. Not endless, not unbreakable, but still standing. In early spring, I got the results back from my blood work. The fatigue wasn't in my head. It was real autoimmune related, the doctor said. Chronic, manageable, but permanent. When I told Danny, he didn't say I was overreacting. He didn't tell me to just walk it off. He looked me in the eye and said, "I'm so sorry you've been carrying this alone." And I realized then that the bill I'd written him snapped off in a moment of fury, and pain was never really about money or chores. It was about being seen, about someone acknowledging that I mattered, that I had mattered all those years, and that the cost of loving someone silently can sometimes be too high when it's not returned. Danny saw that now, and slowly, he was learning to give back. The diagnosis changed more than just our routine. It changed how Danny looked at me. He started reading books, actual medical journals, pamphlets, articles. He asked questions when we visited the rheumatologist together. At first, I was stunned. Then I started to feel something else, seen. Not just as his mother, but as a woman dealing with something real, complex, and frightening. "I didn't know fatigue like that was real," he said one afternoon, scrolling through an article. "I thought it was just being tired. But it's not. It's like your body's betraying you." I nodded. "It's waking up with a tank already empty. It's needing 3 days to recover from a trip to the grocery store." He looked down at his hands and whispered, "I'm sorry I told you to cook." I reached out and touched his wrist. "It wasn't just about the food, Danny. It was about not being heard." That afternoon, he cooked again, salmon with rosemary, steamed vegetables, and rice. He plated it carefully, like he was making up for all the frozen dinners I used to microwave for him after my second shift. As we ate, we didn't talk much. We didn't have to. The silence was different now, not empty, but full of shared understanding. After dinner, he helped me down the hall to my bedroom. "Want me to stay?" he asked, his voice quiet. I looked at him, really looked. "I'm okay tonight," I said. "But thank you." Before he left, he folded a note and slipped it onto my nightstand. I found it later that evening. Payment 2. Showing up without being asked. Reading without being told. Believing you without proof. Loving you without condition. I didn't cry this time. I smiled. Weeks passed. And slowly, something happened. Danny began to notice the world around me. Not just me, but the things that shaped my days and my quiet struggles. One afternoon, I found him crouched over the coffee table, going through a stack of unopened mail. "Mom," he called, "why didn't you tell me your utility bill was past due?" I shrugged from my seat. I figured I'd handle it. He didn't say anything. He just pulled out his phone and paid it. "Mom," he said again the next day, "your Medicare paperwork is a mess." "I know," I admitted. "I get confused with all the forms." He sat next to me, laptop open. "Then let's go through it together." It took an hour, maybe 2. But when we were done, the pile was gone, the papers filed, the medications listed in neat digital notes on his phone. "You didn't have to do all this," I said. He looked at me earnestly, no sarcasm, no defensiveness. "Yes, Mom, I did. I should have done it sooner." I believed him. One Sunday morning, he brought Ava. I hadn't seen my granddaughter in almost 6 months. Not because I didn't want to, but because Ava was 15, and 15-year-olds float between moods like leaves in the wind. And because, if I'm honest, Danny hadn't always made the effort. But this time he did. Ava stood awkwardly at the door, earbuds dangling from her hoodie. "Hey, Grandma." "Hi, sweetheart." She gave me a quick hug, thin arms, cold hands, hair dyed a dark blue. Now Anne plopped on the couch. I made her tea. Peppermint, her favorite. She didn't remember that, but I did. Danny watched us. Nervous. "So," I said gently, "what's your favorite class this year?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe art. Or psychology. Depends on the teacher." We sat there, the 3 of us. It was quiet, but not hostile. Then Ava asked, "Dad said you've been sick?" I nodded. "Yes, but I'm doing okay now." She fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. "That sucks." "Yeah," I said, "but some good things came from it." "Like what?" I glanced at Danny. "Like your dad remembering how to be a son." Ava snorted softly. "That's new." Danny chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, it is." We talked for another hour. She asked about old photos. I showed her the scrapbook I made of Danny's childhood birthday parties, Halloween costumes, his first lost tooth. She laughed when she saw him dressed as a chubby pumpkin at 2 years old. And for the first time in a long time, my house felt full. Not of noise. Of life. Later that week, something shifted. Danny showed up looking worn down. Exhausted. He slumped into the kitchen chair and stared at the floor. "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated. Then, I snapped at Ava. She came home late from school. Lied about where she was. I just lost it. I waited. I yelled, he said. I said things I regret. I stayed quiet. I think, he added, I sounded just like I did to you that day. There it was. The full circle sting. I reached for his hand. Danny, being a parent doesn't come with a manual, but it does come with mirrors. He looked up. She's holding up a mirror for you now, just like I did. It's hard, but don't look away. He swallowed hard. How do I fix it? Don't fix, I said. Heal. And healing starts with listening. That night, he sent me a picture. Ava's bedroom door, with a note taped to it. I'm sorry for raising my voice. I want to hear you, not control you. Let's try again. Love, Dad. Beneath it, he texted me. Thank you for teaching me how to love without pride. I sat alone in my room, light from the hallway casting long shadows on the carpet. For once, they didn't scare me. Spring bled into summer. Danny helped me set up an herb garden on the windowsill. Basil, mint, rosemary. I caught him sniffing the leaves once, eyes closed like a child again. We laughed more, spoke more gently, hugged longer. He even asked me something I hadn't expected. Mom, he said one morning, do you ever wish you had done something else with your life? It was a question I used to be afraid of. But now, I used to, I said. When the days felt long and no one said thank you. When I felt erased. He waited. But now I see it differently. I wasn't just a mother. I was a life giver, a love holder, a quiet warrior. He smiled, eyes wet. You still are. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. There were still hard days. Like the afternoon I forgot my doctor's appointment. I never used to forget things like that. But lately, my mind had been foggy. Some days felt like trying to walk through thick soup, where time bent and melted, and everything blurred at the edges. When Danny arrived and found me still in my robe, sipping cold coffee at 3 p.m., he didn't snap. He didn't lecture. He just knelt beside me, rested a hand on mine, and said, let's reschedule. No big deal. But I looked at him, tears welling. It is a big deal. I'm scared I'm losing parts of myself. He sat with me in the silence that followed. I know, he said, but you're not alone. You'll never be alone in it again. Those words did something. They lifted a small weight off my chest. Not all of it, but enough to breathe. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and sat at the table, the old one Danny used to color on with crayons, staining the wood beneath the surface. I pulled out a new pad of paper. Not a bill this time. A letter. Dear Danny, you've changed. And that means more than you know. Not because I wanted revenge or guilt or a dramatic apology, but because I needed my son back. Not the boy I raised, but the man he's become. You've shown me more care in these last few months than in all the years before combined. And not because you had to, but because you chose to. That's what love looks like. It doesn't shout. It doesn't shame. It shows up quietly, day after day, and asks, what do you need? How can I help carry this with you? Thank you for asking those questions. And thank you for answering mine. Love. Mom. When he read it, he didn't speak. He just folded it neatly, placed it in his wallet, and kept it there like a vow. One Saturday morning, we drove to the old beach house where we used to go when Danny was little. It had long since been sold, but the shoreline hadn't changed. Danny helped me across the sand, one hand gripping mine, the other carrying a fold-out chair. We sat by the water and watched the tide come in. I remember you building sand castles here, I said. You cried when the ocean knocked them over. He chuckled. I thought the waves were evil. No, I smiled. They were just doing what waves do. He nodded, quiet. Mom, he said slowly, I didn't know I was hurting you all those years. I thought I was just being honest. Practical. Tough love, you know. I looked out at the water. Tough love doesn't feel like love when it forgets softness. I see that now. He paused, then added, I used to think you owed me everything. I never thought about what you gave up to give it to me. I turned toward him, eyes soft. I didn't give up my life, Danny. I gave you part of it. And I'd do it again. But I won't do it invisibly anymore. He reached over and took my hand. Never again, he said. Back at home that evening, he cooked spaghetti just like the old days. Except this time, he didn't burn the sauce. We sat at the table, just the two of us. The TV off. No phones. Only presence. At one point, he leaned back and said, You know what I realized? What? I'm not just paying off a debt to you. I'm investing in the future, me, because someday, I'll be in your shoes. And I don't want Ava to treat me the way I treated you. I smiled. Then teach her now. He nodded. I will. And he did. The next week, Ava came over again. This time, with a sketchbook in hand. I drew something, she said shyly. For school. But also for you. She turned the page and showed me. It was a portrait, sitting in my old armchair, surrounded by plants, a cup of tea in my hand, and light streaming in from the window. Beneath it, she'd written, "To the woman who holds quiet power." I nearly dropped it. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Danny stood nearby, silent. Later, after Ava left, he said, "She sees you now, too." And somehow, that meant more than I could put into words. The healing kept happening. Sometimes in conversations. Sometimes in the way Danny rubbed lotion into my swollen hands without me asking. Sometimes in the way he stopped talking when I looked tired and just sat beside me, breathing in rhythm. No fanfare. No drama. Just love finally returned. The summer heat settled over the neighborhood like a heavy quilt. Mornings were still and golden, and in that quiet, I began to realize something. I wasn't afraid of dying anymore. Not in the way I used to be. It wasn't because the illness had gone, it hadn't. My joints still throbbed. My body still betrayed me in small, silent ways. But something inside me had changed. Something bigger than bone and blood. Danny kept coming. Every Sunday. Every Thursday. Sometimes more. He cleaned. He organized my medicine. He brought Ava, who now curled up beside me on the couch like she'd always belonged there, sketching in her notebook while Danny fussed with the tea kettle. One Thursday, I looked up from my recliner and saw him on a ladder outside the front window, fixing the loose gutter he'd ignored for 5 years. I smiled. After dinner, we played cards. The same game I used to play with his father before he passed, a quiet ritual of comfort. He lost. Again. "Mom," he said, tapping the table. "Remember when I was in 3rd grade and broke the neighbor's window with a baseball?" "Of course I do. You blamed it on that poor Henderson boy." "I did," he laughed. "I remember you didn't yell. You just handed me a broom and walked me across the street. You needed to face the consequences." He nodded. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what you were teaching me back then. Quiet strength. No yelling. No punishment. Just truth." I looked at him. Sometimes love is quiet because the world is already too loud. He swallowed hard. I wish I had learned that sooner. I reached out, touched his hand. "You're learning now. That's what counts." A week later, I had a flare-up so severe I couldn't get out of bed. Danny was there within 20 minutes. No lecture. No panic. He brought a bowl of warm water and a cloth, gently wiping my face and neck. His hands were soft. "Steady. Remember when I did this for you?" I asked faintly. "When?" he said. "You had the flu. You were 7. Burning up. I stayed up all night with you. You cried because you thought you'd die." I said, "Not on my watch." He smiled, eyes glassy. "Not on mine, either," he whispered. It was strange. All these years, I had thought of myself as a mother first. A role. A title. A giver. But now, as the days slowed, I felt more like me. Myself. Elaine. A woman who once loved to dance barefoot in her college dorm. Who had dreams of writing a novel. Who loved lemon cake and rainy afternoons and reading medical thrillers even though they stressed her out. Danny started asking about that woman. "Did you ever want to travel?" he asked one evening. "I wanted to see the Grand Canyon," I replied. "But your father didn't like road trips." He grinned. "Let's go." "Danny." I laughed. "I can't do road trips anymore." He shrugged. "So we fly. I'll book the flights. We'll get a hotel with a ramp. I'll rent a wheelchair. You've taken care of me your whole life. Let me return the favor." I stared at him. And then I wept. Not from sadness. From gratitude. We flew out 3 weeks later. It was short. 3 days. But when I stood on the edge of that canyon, wind in my face, Danny beside me felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Alive. Not needed. Not useful. Just alive. I didn't say much. But he didn't need me to. We sat on a bench, Ava snapping photos with her old Polaroid, and watched the sun melt over the red cliffs like honey. I took his hand. "This," I said, "this is what love looks like." He didn't answer with words. He squeezed my hand and held it there long after the sun was gone. When we returned home, things slowed again. Autumn crept in. Danny started volunteering at a senior center. "I never realized how many older folks don't have anyone," he said. "It breaks my heart." I smiled. "Now you know how I felt." He nodded, then looked at me. I want to be the kind of man you'd be proud of. You already are, I said. But thank you for becoming him anyway. We created new rituals. Tuesdays became tea and story. Days sit with me while I told him about my childhood. The ration cards. The nights by candlelight. The first time I fell in love, long before his father. Ava joined sometimes, sketching my expressions while I spoke. One afternoon, she showed me a new drawing. It was me, again, but this time, older, smiling, eyes filled with light. She'd written a caption beneath it. She is not fading. She is glowing in her final season. In late November, I caught a bad cold that turned into something worse. Pneumonia. I was hospitalized for 5 days. Danny stayed every night, slept upright in a stiff chair, brought me lemon lozenges, held my hand during every test. He looked terrified, but not because he didn't want to be there, because he couldn't imagine life without me. That's when I knew the bill had been paid in full, not with money, not even with gestures, but with presence, with a son learning to love out loud, with a daughter-in-law who texted me every day, with a granddaughter who now called just to say, "Hi, Grandma. I drew a tree and thought of you." Love, when returned, feels like sunlight on tired bones. I came home weaker, but not alone. Danny moved in temporarily, said it was just until I got stronger, but I saw the way he rearranged the guest room, made it a real bedroom, called the utility company in my name, put new batteries in all the smoke detectors without asking. He wasn't going anywhere, and neither was my dignity. One night, he found me in the kitchen at 3 a.m., sitting in the dark. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "Just thinking." "About what?" I looked at him. How strange it is to be at the end of something and finally feel whole. He sat beside me. "You're not at the end." I smiled. "Maybe not. But if I am, I'm not afraid anymore." He took my hand. "I wish I could go back and undo every time I made you feel small." "I don't," I said. He looked startled. "Because if you hadn't, I never would have written that bill. And we never would have become who we are now." He nodded. And for once, neither of us had to say anything more. On Christmas morning, I opened a gift from Danny. Inside was a framed photo. It was my handwritten bill, the original copy. But beside it, he'd placed another note in matching handwriting. "Final payment. You gave me life. I finally learned how to give it back. Paid with gratitude. Paid with change. Balance, love." And that, in the end, was everything I ever wanted. Not an apology. Not repayment. Just a son who learned how to love his mother while she was still here to feel it. Just a boy who came home and stayed.